Oh boy, Slay the Princess. Alright, so I was originally planning to make a similar video to this one about organizations and ideologies, one about the groups of Fallout New Vegas and the parties and the ages of Elden Ring and the different ideals of Slay the Princess. But then I played all the way through Slay the Princess, and holy crap, this game is way too interesting to just get a tiny section in another video. I'll still be doing some stuff over Elden Ring and Fallout New Vegas, but it might be a little bit before that happens. Fallout New Vegas is a long-ass game that I've barely scratched the surface of, but I've already played Elden Ring plenty of times through. It's still on the way. Honestly, I really wish I had put Slay the Princess into my previous video since they have similar themes, but I think it's a good thing that it gets its own video. Don't worry, this won't just be me rehashing the same points of mortality as the last vid. I don't think Slay the Princess is as concrete in its theming anyways. It was made with a certain mindset of the player can take what they want from it about death and how it should be handled, without preaching a mindset like immortality good or immortality bad. I recommend playing the game yourself to come to your own conclusions, and as it says in the game, there are no wrong or right choices. I also won't be going over much about the illusions and metaphors about love in the real world. There's already a phenomenal video about that by Katie and Catburger. I'll put it in the description, and I highly recommend you go give it a watch.
You're on a path in the woods, and at the end of that path is a cabin. And in the basement of that cabin is a princess. You're here to slay her. If you don't, it will be the end of the world.
You make the decision to silently continue to the cabin.
You make your way up the short path to the cabin. You'll find the princess within. A warning before you go any further. She will lie, she will cheat, and she will do everything in her power to stop you from slaying her. Don't believe a word she says. We're not going to go through with this, right? She's a princess. We're supposed to save princesses, not slay them. Ignore him. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
The narrator describes the interior of the cabin to you, and you decide not to take the pristine blade perched upon the table. Maybe the princess doesn't deserve to be trapped in here. She is a princess after all. You find yourself entering the basement, a damp, dark, ugly place. If the princess really lives here, slaying her is probably doing her a favor.
Her voice softly carries up the stairs.
Hello? Is someone there?
It's hypnotizing. It's the kind of voice you only have to hear once to remember it for the rest of your life. Don't let it fool you. It's all part of the manipulation. You're playing a dangerous game by coming here unarmed. Good. You're still listening to reason. It would be better if you had a weapon, but you may still be able to do what needs to be done.
Descending the stairs, you lock eyes with her. She's pale and soft, about what you would expect from a poor, helpless princess trapped in a basement. You examine her chains with the intent to release her, realizing quickly that you won't be easily breaking them. The only way out is with a key, as far as you can tell. Heading back upstairs, the door slams shut at the narrator's behest. Now you're both trapped here. The princess, out of options, horrifyingly begins to gnaw at her own arm like a jackal trapped in a snare. The blade clatters on the ground behind you.
There's a time to strike. It's now.
But you don't strike. With ease, you help her finish the job, lopping her arm off like a warm knife through butter. She is strangely silent throughout the whole ordeal. She stands, and you prepare to leave the basement.
No, we won't have any of that. The stakes are too high. You can't just let her escape into the world. No, I can't just let her escape into the world.
The narrator hijacks your body, and you succumb to his control, both of you honing your will into a fine point, raising the blade and cutting down towards the princess. It was strange how easily she was able to lose an arm. Perhaps there is something dangerous about her. But she's quick, and leaps at you with the ferocity of a wild animal. You find yourself striking back and forth, teeth and claws versus the sharp end of your blade. She has an advantage, though, and eventually you find yourself collapsing before her. Perhaps you wounded her enough to kill her. Perhaps not. One way or the other, though.
Everything goes dark,
and you die. If you find this interesting up to this point, I recommend you go play the game yourself, as I always will. We're jumping into serious spoiler territory after this, and it's such a good game that I just don't do it justice in a video essay. Okay, go play it now, bye-bye. Are the people who haven't played the game gone yet? Alright, cool. Slay the Princess is a visual novel game. I know, red flags are going off, but this is like a really good one. Where you play through a series of cycles, paths in the woods, cabin, basement, princess, slay, or don't. On the face of it, that sounds like a kind of boring game, but luckily for us, it is constantly subverting itself, the player and the princess retaining memories of the previous loop. The narrator does not. Each time you restart the loop, a voice is put in your head that reflects whatever actions you took in the previous loop. For example, if you choose to blindly devote yourself to the princess, you will gain the voice of the smitten.
My love, we're here to rescue you from your unjust and foul imprisonment.
If you decide to throw away the entire premise of the cabin and basement and turn around on the path, you will gain the voice of the contrarian.
The entire world ending wasn't enough to get rid of us. I don't think there's much he can do other than object. I wonder what else we can do to ruin his day.
These voices also remember the loops, acting as angels and devils on your shoulder, each piping in with their opinions of the given situation, and sometimes having a direct impact on the situation you find yourself in. Another difference between loops is the woods themselves, the cabin, and the basement. More importantly, though, the princess is impacted based on something I'll get into later, changing between different forms. She could become a ghostly specter, upset about you killing her in the previous loop, or she could become a furious, muscle-bound devil intent on beating the ever-loving shit out of you when you face her in a fistfight during the previous loop. These differences is what makes up Slay the Princess's game loop, repeating cycles, with the narrator as a through line between each one. He's the only one who doesn't retain his memory, never changing his mind on what he wants. For you to slay the princess. So, you find yourself stuck between two choices throughout the game, for the most part. Deciding whether to take the blade to your royal highness or let her free, accompanied by an entourage of voices in your head, pulling you in 100 different directions. Now, there are about 10 million different ways to take a look at Slay the Princess. It's a highly subjective game, with a shit ton of themes all collapsed within itself. But the way I wanted to look at this was from the perspective of subjectivity the game takes. There are no wrong choices, no wrong pathways. All endings are valid. This is reflected in the characters in the game as well. I don't think any of them are incorrect, per se, on their perspective of the world. A lot of this game is about perspectives. Your perspective, the voice's perspective, the narrator's perspective, the princess and her vessel's perspectives, and how each of those perspectives affect each other. In my opinion, an integral part of writing anything is to make sure that every party sees themselves as justified in their own actions, and their actions are directly correlated with their worldview. There's a trifecta of concepts I like to attribute to characters to exemplify this: ideals, goals, and actions. So let's start with ideals. This is the code or worldview the character holds. Let's take Walter White from Breaking Bad as an example. His ideals are based around family values and how a winner-take-all mentality is what someone needs to be successful. He believes in traditional gender roles for men, seeing himself as the provider for his family, and likes the status that comes with that. On its own, these ideals aren't insane. They're not really things that I personally agree with, but there are plenty of people with these ideals who don't end up becoming crazy drug lords. For the next part of my trifecta, goals, gets us a little bit closer to the drug lord territory. Walter White has goals that line up with his worldview. He wants to be a provider, so he gives himself the goal of selling meth to provide financial support for his family after his death. If he didn't have that mentality of being a stereotypical father figure in a family, someone whose job it is to make sure his family is well off, he wouldn't find himself with the goals of selling drugs. His goals are backed up by the ideals. And then the final step, actions. The character takes actions that lead to their goals. As long as the action is in support of the goal, it can be justified by the worldview. I'm not going to get into very much of Walter's actions, but you can look at some of the terrible shit he did and see why he feels justified in doing it, because he's just trying to provide. This simple, three-step process is so important to writing three-dimensional characters that actually have depth to them. One flaw I see in some writing, and you can probably think of some examples, is when someone is trying to write a morally gray character, and it's just a character that does some good and some bad things. This honestly pisses me off to no end. When a character or an organization are trying to be played off as gray, and the example is yeah, they donate all to charity and stuff all the time, but also sometimes they just decide to kick dogs for fun. That's not morally gray, that's a walking contradiction. Truly being morally gray often means that the character has good ideals or goals, but the actions that are done to get to their goals or support their ideals are terrible. We'll see examples of this in Slay the Princess. actions done that in a vacuum are considered to be awful, awful things, but are justified to the characters because of how they tick or what their goals are. I feel like all well-written characters are some slice of morally gray. Even the most goody two-shoes of characters commit some pretty bad actions to back up their good goals, and even super evil characters usually have an understandable motivation behind their actions. For example, Luke Skywalker committed an act of terrorism that makes any bombing done in the real world look like a joke, and Thanos is only killing half the population for the sake of the other half, although I still have a shit ton of problems with Thanos' actions, like how it feels like they made him do an action that didn't need to be done just for the sake of high stakes. When he's got that much power, he could probably come up with a better solution, but I don't know. I'm not really a big Marvel fan. They probably have explanation why he didn't do something else, like in the 65th spin-off TV show they made on Disney Plus or something else. Okay, that's enough ranting and stuff. Let's get into Slay the Princess. So the first characters we're going to go over is you, the player. The little bird, the hero, the fledgling, the dragon, the decider, and the long quiet. Spoiler alert, you are a god of this world, and all the other worlds. Congratulations, I guess. The long quiet was created when the narrator split God, I suppose, into two. Change and death in one half, the princess, and everything else in the other half, you, the long quiet. And as a man-made god, you have a job to do, and that job is to slay the princess, to kill your other half, a goal given to you by the narrator. Now the extent through which you follow that goal is up to you, but it is the one task you've been imbued with from the start. Another thing you've been imbued with is a shit ton of voices in your head, which we're going to go over one by one and break down what they want and such. And then we'll get into your character as a whole. There are 11 voices in total, each with their own personalities, ideals, goals, and they each take their own actions to get to said goals.
We're not going to go through with this, right? She's a princess. We're supposed to save princesses, not slay them.
The first voice you encounter every time you boot up the game is the voice of the hero, the one steadfast angel on your shoulder who'll stick by your side no matter what. The hero is essentially the moral compass of the voices, always striving to do what seems morally correct to him. His ideals are based in being heroic and helping others ultimately, almost a caricature of what a hero is supposed to be. Unfortunately for him, Slay the Princess is not a game where the binary of right and wrong is extremely clear. He finds himself unable to make a decision more often than not, looking for compromises in situations that almost always leave everyone unhappy, and the situation worse than before. Due to his almost naive nature and inability to make strong decisions, he leaves the choices up to you almost exclusively, piping up every once in a while to state his opinion, things like killing a princess is wrong and the like, but you're ultimately left as the judge, jury, and executioner for what occurs. I think it's safe to say his goals are to reduce harm to all parties as much as possible. He doesn't know whether or not to trust the narrator on whether or not the princess can end the world, and he doesn't trust the princess fully either because something is obviously off with her regardless on which route you take. His heroic ideals lead to indecision. I love the voice of the hero, I really do. He's a good grounding force to stay around with you throughout the game, but a lot of his choices aren't particularly useful given the situation. For example, let's take a scenario you find yourself posed with very early into the game. You acquire the pristine blade, make your way to the basement, and chat it up with the princess. She gives off some off-putting comments, but altogether she doesn't seem like the enormous threat to the world the narrator views her as. So, you're presented with a binary. Slay the princess, a very unheroic thing to do if she isn't the world-ending threat the narrator presented her as, or you can let her go. But this also isn't perfectly heroic, because if she is the world-ending threat the narrator is trying to convince you of, you now have the blood of the entire world on your hands. So, the choice that the hero agrees with the most is just leaving her locked in the basement. Wash your hands of the whole thing. Now, as any good compromise does, this makes everyone upset. In the narrator's eyes, she's just going to get out later, and in the princess' eyes, you just did the exact same thing the people before did to her. So, she gets out, as the narrator predicted, and then she kills you. And in the next loop, she's definitely not very happy with you. No one is happy. I mean, even in the Razor route, where the princess is very obviously trying to stab you, the hero is willing to try to find room for the whole thing to be a misunderstanding, wanting to go look at a bird with the princess.
Okay, now listen. You're not actually buying this, are you? Listen. Yes, I would like to look at a bird. You can look at a bird later. But if we look at a bird now, we wouldn't have to be here. He has a point. Just make a decision already.
There's a very major flaw of the hero, which I think is really good writing. Characters are supposed to be flawed, and despite his good intentions, he often doesn't have the resolve to make a difficult decision. Now, if given a more clear situation, like that of Apotheosis, where the princess is obviously trying to end the world, he has very little qualms about trying to slay her. She's a monster, and heroes slay monsters. There's a good bit of confusion as to where the voice of the hero came from, as all the other voices come about from you making a decision in line with their personality, but the hero is there from the very start. My personal favorite theory is that the narrator placed the voice of the hero there, intentionally or not. You were created to save the world, so he views the long quiet as heroic.
I'm not being a pessimist. I'm just being realistic. You're being annoying.
Now to my least favorite of the voices. Plenty of people seem to like him, but I just can't stand the voice of the broken. This voice is created by giving up to the princess, allowing yourself to be broken by whatever situation you find yourself in. Therefore, this voice is broken himself. Extremely self-deprecating, pessimistic, and generally having whatever the furthest thing from confidence is in the given moment. It's kinda hard to pin down a group of ideals for someone with as little willpower as the broken, but if I had to say one, it would be some form of submission. Whenever the broken meets the princess, almost 100% of the time he's immediately wanting to give herself over to her. He wants to avoid pain more than anything, desiring love and care from the princess but seeing himself below it. So, when it comes to his goals, you get submitting to the princess. Pretty plain and simple. Which is what I would have said if I didn't just play through the Fury route with the broken on your side right before I wrote this section. Holy crap, this actually made me really not hate this voice. The broken isn't just the fact that you are broken, and all the stuff I said before remains true, but there's a little bit more than that. He has empathy, understanding, he knows the pain of others. Even after being unwound, ripped to atoms spread across the planet by the princess, he still sticks with you throughout all of it. Even when the stubborn and the hero have their wills broken, when they abandon you to the torture, the broken stays because he knows you. And after all of that, he knows that the princess is broken herself. He is willing to forgive her because he understands, and when the narrator talks about how tired he is, he understands him too. The broken is compassion. He is weak, but his ideals are that of comfort and safety, and his goals are to extend that comfort and safety to himself and those around him. Although he's less than useless in some situations where you need to fight, his pessimism and doubt making the princess even stronger. He's one of the best voices at understanding the princess. The broken is the voice of understanding and empathy.
No, fuck that. If we're gonna have to keep doing this over and over and over again, we're not starting in that goddamn woods every time. We're starting in the fucking cabin.
Now here's one of my favorite voices, the voice of the cheated. King
Crock of shit.
The cheated understands what it means to be a hater, as he is just a poor voice created whenever you get fucked over by the princess. If I was to break down what the ideals of the cheated are, it's getting back at the world. He's been treated unfairly, and he just wants to eke out one win for one time. He doesn't usually get the chance to, though. He's doubtful of every situation, kinda similar to the broken and paranoid in that aspect. But when it comes to it, he doesn't let that try to stop him. If I was going to talk about some voices that are similar to his, it would be the contrarian and the opportunist. He is defiant of the narrator fairly often. Hey look, there's some actions. Because last time, listening to the narrator and trying to slay the princess got him killed, such as in the Razor. He really just wants to settle the score more than anything, which I respect a lot. The Razor route is the best example of this.
Let's make her hurt for what she's done to us.
He immediately starts to assume she's trying to trick him, looking to stab him the moment she gets the chance to, which is true. Of course, you end up getting killed by the princess, which just pisses off the cheated even more, up to the point of ignoring the narrator.
Your Honor, don't lose your head. We're in a cabin and we'll take it from here.
The cheated then begins to ignore the narrator and the player, taking control himself. He's sick of options being taken away from him, so he gives himself the choices. That's really what makes up the cheated, the feeling of being robbed and the desire to take things back. He wants to end up on top at least once in a world that stomps on him again and again, doing whatever it takes to do it. His will is strong, in more of a fuck it we ball mentality rather than a stubborn way. But he doubts himself, sometimes giving up in the face of adversity when he feels as though the world has fully beaten him down. Realizing that the whole system is rigged against him, when in reality his own perception of that makes it a reality.
I doubt it. I think I'm better at killing than you are.
The voice of the cold is a really interesting one to me, because his code isn't really a code in the natural sense. His mindset and personality is one of pragmatic detachment. He prides himself on not having the same feelings as the other voices, considering them weak in comparison due to their emotions. He's created at moments when the decider chooses to forsake emotion, either coldly killing the princess or attempting to distance themselves from emotion and pain. For example, if you immediately listen to the narrator and kill the princess, and then kill yourself, you get the voice of the cold. The cold's ideals are just based around being unfeeling and trying to find things that interest him. Whatever he does isn't based on what he thinks is right or wrong, but whatever adds a new data point to the situation. So his actions are a little bit more difficult to predict because he doesn't have any goals per se, but rather is just wanting to find a way to entertain himself, ironically searching for new things despite his claimed ability to feel no joy from it. The times he becomes more useful is when the long quiet finds himself in painful situations, as the voice of the cold is very good at convincing you that feeling is nothing more than a sensation that can be easily ignored as joy or any other simple emotion. He helps you to be a better killing machine, being able to ignore the princess hurting you in order to get closer at slaying her. He hones you into a sharp blade, considering the other voice's noise that just needs to be ignored. Although sometimes, his emotionless voice isn't something that's welcome depending on the situation. He's often useless when attempting to free the princess, sitting on the sidelines and considering himself above the whole thing. He's very obviously arrogant and falls into the same trap as the hero sometimes, not being passionate enough about something to come to a strong conclusion one way or another.
Do you think we can throw her out the window?
This is probably my favorite voice, or at least on the top two, even though he's a fairly simple one. The voice of the contrarian appears whenever you do something that defies the entire situation, from turning around and ignoring the presented premise as a whole, or playing dead in the face of a beast obviously smart enough to tell. His ideals are ridiculously simple. Do whatever it takes to piss off whoever is trying to tell him what to do. In this situation, that presents itself as a goal to piss off the narrator above all else, which is hilarious to him and me, and literally world-ending to the narrator. Get mad. Similar to the cheated, they both have a major bullshittery factor. Except in the case of the cheated, bullshit is thrown at him, and in the case of the contrarian, you throw bullshit everywhere you can, hurling the dagger out the window, trying to smash the princess into many pieces during the stranger, just whatever it takes to be as discordant as possible. He's honestly quite a useful voice, as in the subjective world of the construct, I'll get into that, being a contrarian creates options, but of course, being such a counterculture voice generates a lot of annoyment and resentment from the other voices, because most of the time, whatever he wants to do directly undermines whatever goal they have, such as slaying the princess. There's not a ton to break down that can't be discerned just from vibes with this guy, but I like him a lot.
The air's shifting. She's getting ready to pounce. Move, now.
The Hunted is a voice that I see misinterpreted fairly often, talked as if he's either paranoid light or some big game hunter. The voice of the Hunted is survival instinct manifest. He shows up in situations where the long quiet is made into prey by the princess, mercilessly slaughtered regardless on whether or not he tried fighting back. If I was to attribute some ideals to him, it would be survival above all else. It gives him a simple goal at the least: don't die. The voice of the Hunted is prey trying to stay alive no matter the cost, living moment by moment. This is best presented in the Beast route, where the Hunted is the key to surviving being hunted in the dark, able to dart away from the princess perfectly. If you ignore him, you'd be dead where you stand, his instinct keeping you alive in the moment. Despite that though, that's all the Hunted is able to do for you. If you follow his advice to a T, the princess will win the war of attrition, slowly gaining on you with each dodge, the protest of the hero telling you have to change things up or you will die, falling on deaf ears before you're rent in half by the jaws of the princess. The Hunted cannot plan. He just needs to survive 1 second longer than the last one. Another example of his priorities of survival beating everything else is his comment on you choosing to slay yourself rather than be taken away by the princess and the beast, calling it a waste of life. Even though allowing yourself to be devoured by the princess results in the end of the world, and you know that slaying yourself gives you a redo, the hunter doesn't want to die any under circumstances. He's more animalistic than any of the other voices, calling the blade a steel claw and relying on his extraneous senses like smell and instinctual feeling rather than vision. Regardless though, his survivalistic nature serves a purpose, and he is damn good at it.
See? He gets it. There's nothing wrong with looking out for number one.
Man, this guy's a fucking bitch, but I can't help but love him for it. The Opportunist, aka the backstabber of the voices. Ideals and goals? He has one, end up on top. And he's willing to play the cards any way to get there, especially dirty. He will lie, he will cheat, and he will do anything in his power to be the one to win. He always goes for the easiest path to victory, and sides with whoever's in power. Take the Princess and the Dragon, for example. When the Decider is booted out of his body and stuck inside the princess, the Opportunist pushes the discussion towards slaying the princess, even when he's aware that the Decider is in there. 2 birds with 1 stone, he says, swinging the knife towards the chest you and the princess share. And the moment you're back in control, he sides back with you, saying he was never cut out for leadership. He switches sides quickly, his allegiance is for no one but himself. If you get booted from your body again by cutting the princess free on your own, he immediately turns the knife back on you, saying that nothing's changed about the situation. This pretty much sums up the Opportunist in a nice, pretty bow. Honestly, he's useful for that trait though, being able to read backstabbers such as the Witch, knowing what she's about to do because it's what he would do. And I can't say he's not charming. I mean, he's a total fucking dick, but like, I can't help but to like him. He reminds me of Patches from Dark Souls a lot. Like, you know he's lying all the time and he will kick you down a hole at any moment, but you can't help but to love the guy. I suppose cheeky British voices have that effect. Now that I'm thinking on it, Wheatley is another example of that. He will puff you up and flatter you when you have the cards, and he'll run a knife through you the next moment. Most of the time his goals are aligned with the narrator's, just because slaying the princess seems like the path of least resistance, and he can sniff out a traitor from a mile away. It takes one to know one, I suppose.
Lungs, liver, nerves, heart, lungs, liver, nerves, heart, lungs, liver, nerves.
This is another voice I see misinterpreted fairly often. The voice of the paranoid is not just the voice of being scared. He is specifically paranoia. He is the insidious voice that creeps and questions everything from a perspective of danger, a distrust and questioning of the very reality around you. And I mean, yes, he's afraid of things, but specifically has a kind of irrational fear of bad things that are going to happen. This may seem like a major downside at first, and yes, I do have to admit it has its drawbacks. He expects the worst things to happen, and questions everything around him. Doing this in the construct often leads to those fears becoming a reality. I'll explain a bit of the nature of the princess here because it's important for context with the paranoid. But whatever you believe the princess to be, she becomes. Do you think she has a knife on her? She's got a knife on her. Do you see her as a beast? Next loop, you better bet she's going to become a beast. Therefore, someone who is consistently afraid of the princess and worried about all the ways she's going to kill you becomes a major liability. The paranoid's main ideals, I would say, is to question all that surrounds you and that pain or dying are bad. He doesn't trust anyone, doubting anything presented to him. Kind of skeptic-pilled if you ask me. He has a fairly reasonable ideal, but his madness, paranoia, and all of his other mental problems lead to bringing that questioning to a maximum. Luckily for the construct, though, questioning reality is sometimes all you need. The nightmare is the vessel often used when talking about him, and yes, heart, lungs, liver, nerves goes hard as fuck and shows his mastery over himself. I think apotheosis does more to characterize him. Take a look at apotheosis if you bring the paranoid with him. With a little bit of nudging from the narrator, the voice of the paranoid finally understands the rules of subjectivity with the princess, his predisposition to questioning reality leading to him being actually a really powerful force in the fight against apotheosis, the very belief that you can kill her, helping to kill her. He is able to grasp control over his very mind, and with the help of the Decider and the other voices, slay a fucking god. Go off, King. I suppose. Why did I say that? Why did I fucking... Don't say that. Cut that. Cut that.
Yes, don't believe a word she says. Just go in, take the knife, and do what you're supposed to. Wink.
Hello, Sherlock Holmes. The voice of the skeptic is the voice of questioning that isn't the paranoid. I'm mostly kidding, this is somewhat a reductive explanation of him, but he does share some things with the paranoid, although I think he would be personally insulted if I said that. The skeptic appears whenever you question the situation with the princess, creating the nagging voice in your head, telling you things aren't all as they seem. He approaches things from a more logical perspective than the paranoid, wanting an explanation of some kind to be able to fully believe anything. An explanation that the narrator is reluctant to give, mind you. Even when the evidence by the narrator is given to him, one of the funniest moments of the game, his first assumption is that the handwriting is forged. That's his ideals, to question everything around him and find the truth, which he is constantly in doubt of. He usually trusts what he can see, and doubts things that have been shown to be untrustworthy before, like the narrator when he turns your body against you. Honestly, a bit ironic coming from the skeptic, which I'll explain in a second. He's a planner, a plotter, an organizer of things as shown in the den route, carefully coming up with a way to deal with the princess. He's similar to the stubborn in a way that he can get things done with steadfast determination and a rock-steady plan, which is unlike the stubborn who always just goes in guns a-blazing. When something goes amiss in his plan, the entire thing ends up ass first and sideways for good old skeptic. His plotting and planning is honestly something that I didn't really get at first. It doesn't exactly fit under the vein of skepticism, but it does match up with his general personality. His direct goals seem to shift moment to moment. More often than not, he just wants to figure out what's going on and push forwards. He doesn't really like stagnation, because stagnation usually results in information being withheld. He is so against it that in The Prisoner, when the player tries to accept the good ending the narrator gives you, the skeptic forces control out of your body and slays you himself, just looking to get more information out of the situation since he doesn't have the full truth of it. He's remarked to be a bit of a philosophical one in the moment of clarity, questioning things like, who am I? What is I? Much to the chagrin of the other voices. The skeptic's his questions manifest.
Who needs a weapon when we have the power of love on our side?
The voice of the smitten is the hopeless romantic within the long quiet. He's a lover boy through and through, loving all iterations of the princess across all realities. That's beautiful, right? Not quite. The smitten idealizes love and love alone. He doesn't love the princess for who she is or getting to know her.
He loves her because he loves the idea of loving her. That's how he's able to justify anything about the princess as some aspect of perfection, because he follows the logic of, I love the princess is perfect, therefore anything she does/wants is perfect as well, instead of the actual required path of falling in love, which is getting to know and love the person because of their traits, not loving their traits because you're supposed to love them. He's in love with love, and the princess is just an object of fixation to push that mindset upon. Strangely enough, I see that fairly often in the real world. Smitten doesn't appear very often, and a good amount of the times he does, it's just as a side character in a big entourage of voices. But his main appearance in The Damsel and Happily Ever After do a good bit to explain his personality. In The Damsel, even if the princess says she wants to end the world, Smitten is totally a-okay with that, believing that if the princess wants to end the world, that must be the right thing. His steadfast belief of her perfection is what leads to her being able to just slip the chains and her in the long quiet being able to open the locked door. If he believes it so, which he does through the power of love, it must be so. A useful thing to have when you're trying to free the princess. In Happily Ever After, we see a darker side of the Smitten, though. He traps you and the princess in a beautiful building, providing you with everything you could ever want because he notices that the princess is against the idea of staying in the cabin together with just you, blaming the fact that the situation just isn't right enough for her, wanting to provide her with
everything she doesn't know she wants.
He genuinely wants a world where he can be happy with her forever, but that's just not how the world works. I know I said I wasn't going to get into the love allegories here, but this is just too ripe of a fruit when we're talking about Smitten, so I may as well. I see the Happily Ever After route as an example of relationships that pretend like everything is okay, where they pretend to see things as happily ever after, but there's serious problems in their relationship that they just refuse to acknowledge. The couple never get to truly know each other, playing out a facsimile of a relationship instead of experiencing true love, which is vulnerable and messy and imperfect, not happily ever after. Honestly, the main reason I like to look at that perspective on Happily Ever After is I have some problems with how it's postured in the story in relation to the narrator, which I'll get into later, but that's enough about that. Smitten is love of love personified, not love of the princess.
No, we can do this. Just keep pushing.
Push, 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 punch, and fight, and never let the light die. The voice of the stubborn is my personal favorite of the voices, in close competition with the contrarian, and a fairly simple one if I'm being honest, but he has some of his own complexities tucked within him if you want to read between the lines. The stubborn is a voice interested in the cycles of things, fighting and killing and fighting again and again and again and again. His ideals, if it can really even be called that, is that if it doesn't work, hit it, and if that doesn't work, hit it again, ad nauseum. It will work eventually, I swear. And honestly, sometimes it does work. The belief of hitting it enough working, sinking in, and helping you to keep fighting, even past the edge of death. The adversary is the best route to really get a grasp of the voice of the stubborn. His endless determination allowing you to keep fighting the princess over and over again, even when your brains are splattered against the wall and your face is blown off by an earth-shattering punch. You and the princess just get back up and fight and fight and fight, her matching your energy as well. And you two do fight until the very world fades away behind you. The stubborn is one I see somewhat aligning with the ideals of the narrator, if I'm being honest, just because he doesn't seem to mind stagnation. It's nearly impossible to make him give up. Like, even in the moment of clarity, he keeps wanting to hold the princess back despite going through an indeterminate amount of torture, but obviously enough to break all of the other voices. The one time I see him break that I remember is in The Fury, literally in the face of just about eternal torture. I don't think he would hate the narrator's world with very little change, because all he needs is a good fight to keep him entertained. He would be happy to fight the adversary until the end of time, and then past that, which is kind of ironic because the narrator needs the princess dead for his plan to work, and if he's fighting her, she's not dead. Poor guy. In another world, they could have been friends.
You're the long quiet, the god I made to rid the world of death.
And now to the center of it all, the long quiet himself. You, the player, the decider, the one who controls them all. It's hard to ascribe ideals to the long quiet, as you're the one who makes the choices that lead to different outcomes. He could be aligned with the narrator's goals if you are, or he could be the one to agree to let the princess out. You could forgo the entire system itself and leap into the unknown, or you could throw it all away and fade into oblivion. The long quiet is a looking glass. He has eyes on the world. He is the hands that manipulate. He, as in you, observe and mold the situation based on your decisions. Despite all of the powers of change that the princess has, it's your decisions in the end that make or break everyone's goals. You hold all of the power. The princess needs you, the narrator needs you, and you can decide where to go. There are no ideals, goals, or actions that I can describe the long quiet having, because the ideals, goals, and actions are all yours. So tell me, dear viewer, what version of our feathered friend are you?
Maybe there's still room for us to chat before the final curtain call. What do you say?
So, we finally make our way out of talking about one character. Let's move on to talking about the titular princess of Slay the Princess, but let's get a little history lesson on Slay the Princess lore before jumping into this. A long time from now, the bones of the universe are old, and people are consumed with the thoughts of oblivion. The stars are old, and the end of the world is nigh. So a man, a normal, mortal man, made a move in an attempt to forestall the end. The details of how he did it is unknown, but he split the very god of the universe in two, separating most of change and death from everything else, creating two gods, the Long Quiet and the Shifting Mound. The Long Quiet was given a job to destroy the Shifting Mound, and with it destroy the concept of death itself, and the Shifting Mound was given a role, a designation as something the Long Quiet could easily destroy, taking the form of a princess. They were both placed in a construct by the man, him weaving himself into the construct as a guiding voice, an echo of his former self to assist the Long Quiet in slaying the princess. So, let's get into the details of that princess. It's difficult to break her character down in a way that I've done with the previous characters, as she defies a lot of preconceived notions on what a princess is, but I'll do a simple version of it. The princess has the ideal of change, but saying she has it is a simplification. She has the very concept of change, she does not idealize it. Her goals are to survive, continue existing. She does not choose things to do, her very being reflects on the universe. By remaining alive, death and the vast majority of all kinds of change continue to occur. I say the vast majority, because there is change tucked within the Long Quiet. The narrator made sure to do that because he didn't want to create a world completely devoid of change, but the princess still holds the vast majority of it within her. The princess is more of a creature that is acted upon, built by the perception of those around her instead of actively choosing what form to take or what decisions to make. There's a reason the narrator doesn't want you to know any details relating to the nature of the princess and the construct beside what is required to slay her. Every single thought the Long Quiet has about the princess directly influences what she becomes and what she can do. If you enter the cabin with the knife, you will believe that you need the knife, leading to a harsher, more calculated princess calling up from the stairs.
Who's there?
She sounds dangerous. It's almost as if she's the one in charge down here.
If you leave it behind, you don't expect to be needing a knife for the princess, leading to a softer, more cliché kind of princess.
Hello? Is someone there?
It's hypnotizing. It's the kind of voice you only have to hear once to remember it for the rest of your life.
Now, there's not a direct conversion. You don't expect the princess to be a knife monster when she stabs you, but you do expect her to be hiding weapons in some way, and more dangerous than she appears outwardly. That's why the narrator doesn't want you to know about the princess's true nature. Understanding her to be the concept of change itself and being capable of destroying the world easily does not bode well for a being that becomes what you believe of it.
It's simple, really. She can become whatever people perceive her to be. That's easy. I'll just will her into something really small. But wait, what if I accidentally will her into something that ends the world? Oh no, what if just thinking that?
But you wouldn't have finished your hypothetical thought because she would have already destroyed the world.
Although, the knife cuts both ways. If you expect the princess to be strong, that's what she will become. But if you believe that you can kill her, she becomes that very concept. Apotheosis is an example I've been bringing up here a lot, but it's a perfect parallel. The princess cascading into stronger variations, mostly because of the voice of the broken, until she becomes a god. But of course, all it takes is the strong will and thought that she can be killed, and it results in you being able to slay her. Speaking of gods, let's talk about what happens when the princess is brought to full fruition. The Shifting Mound puts you through loops.
She asks that I tell you to remember her. You won't.
Wanting you to bring her more perspectives to reach the full power she is capable of. When the narrator split her, she was made weak, torn apart, and in a nascent form. She requires you, the Long Quiet, to bring her nature back into her. Her variations, vessels, such as the Razor, the Adversary, the Nightmare, and the Damsel, and the Grey, and the Beast, and more possibilities to remind her of what she is. Eventually, culminating in her reaching her full form, the ultimate version of the Shifting Mound, holding all of the vessels and the ability of change, and yes, even death, in her multitudes. She becomes a god again, and with being a god comes a level of self-assurance that cannot be penetrated. She cannot be reasoned with or have her mind changed in this form, as it's impossible to change something beyond the concept of what it is. It's like trying to tell an apple that it isn't a fruit, making the color blue rationalize itself as orange. She is the very concept of change and death, So she's impossible to convince of anything other than a world with change and death. It's her very nature, impossible to separate from her. Well, I mean, I guess it's possible, but it's already been done, and now this is what remains. An unstoppable force. Honestly, I don't think her being like that means with a certainty that she's right. I believe that change is important to the world, and death alongside it, but I don't think the argument for or against a world without death is completely correct with one answer or the other, and the game realizes this too. The Shifting Mound is a god, so the only thing that matters to her is the dealings of gods. She cannot understand the fear that comes with death, the awful loss that exists at the hand of the Reaper, and the objective terror of leaping into oblivion, and she will never be subject to those concepts. As the narrator says,
You haven't. You've flirted with dying. You've played pretend. But your consciousness is an unbroken stream.
the Shifting Mound refuses to put herself in the shoes of mortals, to feel the fear of oblivion, as she can only act within her nature. It's even beyond the person to an ant allegory, or hell, even the person to a bacteria allegory. She exists on a fundamentally different level than anything close to mortal in the form of a god. Her only interest is to become whole again, to bring the long quiet and her back together, and continue to exist and influence the world as they have always been. This is a love story. She can be brought back to a smaller form, though. With the help of the voice of the hero, you can go back to the cabin where it all started, bringing the princess back to her initial form upon meeting her. There, she can be slain, and the narrator's plan can be brought to fruition if you want to, creating a world without death and ruled by the long quiet along with whatever voices you met along the way. The dawn of a new age without death. I'll get into the future when we talk about the narrator. There are two other options, though. The princess and you can decide not to make a decision, coming to an impasse. You had chosen not to join her in continuing your nature, but you can't bring yourself to slay her either, so you wash your hands of all of it this time. You allow the world to continue existing by restarting the entire game. She can do it since you believe her to be able to, and you restart the entire cycle, hoping that you either continue to restart forever and ever, or the alternative, a decision is made by the long quiet that ends the loop. The other option is chosen when you decide not to take the knife, you and the princess deciding that you're tired of this god's business. You leap into the unknown, leaving the cabin behind in your smaller, closer to mortal forms. Neither of you know what will happen when you leave, and neither does anyone who's played the game. All of these decisions reflect interestingly on the character of this version of the princess. I suppose she was created by your perception of her being a princess in this way, as this version of the princess was created when you had your first perception of what she should be. The princess's motivations are similar to the Shifting Mounds, but not quite the same. They both have the desire to survive, but this princess has no interest in the matter of gods. This princess is a loving one, the moments you and her share here being some of the most vulnerable and personal moments of the game. This princess loves you, which I suppose is because she is you. You were originally one being, but you were torn apart and forced to fight and kill each other over and over again. But that desire is still deep down for you to be together. And that care for you manifests in a trust that you will make the decision she wants. And maybe you will, but that's fully up to you.
And if it's bad, then it won't be bad. Not with you. I love you too.
I think you know what I am.
And now for the man of the hour, the whole reason I wanted to make a video about Slay the Princess. The narrator is a phenomenally complex and layered, yet flawed character, and I really love him so much, and I disagree with him and agree with him, and if he was gay I would probably be into him, but alas I'm not, so instead here I go writing nerdy video essays about the guy. The narrator describes himself as painfully mortal, splitting God in twain for the sake of mankind. His goal is to have the long quiet perceive her as dead, which due to the nature of the princess makes her dead, and the world will be saved from death. His ideals are against the unknown, against death, and against the loss of mankind. He views these ideals as an immutable truth.
I'm only delusional if I'm wrong. But I'm not wrong. I can't be wrong.
He is almost completely incapable of seeing things from another perspective, which honestly kind of makes him similar to the princess in an interesting way. Although a fundamental difference between the two is for the princess to get what she wants, she must live. But for the narrator to get what he wants, he has to be dead. When making the tear, the narrator knew he could not remain alive in the world he envisioned. The princess is perception, and if he continued to exist, he would become aware of what she is, his awareness threatening to destroy the entire plan he made. So he killed himself, hoping to create a world that he knew he would never be a part of.
There's a cruel irony to it all.
The only way I could share my dream with the world was to never be able to see it for myself.
He wove an echo of himself into the fabric of the construct and hoped that it would be enough to convince the Long Quiet to do what he was made for. There's a big part of the narrator that I see misconstrued all the time. He can be called a lot of things, but he isn't selfish. He's a visionary, an idealist. He wants his plan to come to fruition, but it doesn't benefit him at all. He did it for mankind, the mankind he believes in. All throughout the game, he talks about how you're doing it for those outside. Do it for them, yada yada yada. He truly cares about the others, and his vision is a specifically pleasant one for them.
Light, burdenless, an eternal pattern of forgetfulness leading into the joys of rediscovery. Everyone will be with the ones they love. No more fear, no more howling chaos. Just life, forever.
He rarely ever lies throughout the game either. I mean, just trust me, play through the game with the knowledge you have after this video, and it's true. There are no hidden ulterior motives, there is no big evil plan behind the scenes. Just slay the princess to save the world. Now, does that make him fully correct in his goals? No, but I don't think I really want to get into the specifics of which viewpoint or ending is the right one of Slay the Princess. But the world he envisions is a good one by his perspective. That's all I'm trying to explore here, is how he fully and truly views himself as the good one in this story. And it's very hard to contradict his viewpoint from an objective perspective. He may be an asshole, but he's doing it from a humanistic perspective. And he planned his world out well, as he understood the significance of removing change from the universe.
When I broke the cycle, I made sure that the tear was rough. You carry a part of what should be her, and she carries a part of what should be you. Things won't be as they are now, but they won't be nothing either.
Now, what does this world without most of change look like? I don't know. You get a glimpse of it when you slay the princess in the final ending, but there's no way to tell if it's a better or miserable existence. If you want my personal opinion, I'm cautiously optimistic. If death is true oblivion, then I somewhat agree with the perspective that anything is better than it. But I also haven't, cannot, and never will exist in a world where you live forever. Perhaps it becomes not worth it eventually. I guess that's asking the question if life is primarily suffering or primarily joy, and if brought out to an infinite amount of iteration, it will level out as good or bad. One thing I see people ignore time and time again is that the narrator says he has seen it.
Of course there won't be worse. I saw a glimpse of a better world, and I did what I could to make it real. Anything is better than oblivion. In the end, nobody wants to leave.
Is he right? I have no idea. This is why I have some problems with Happily Ever After, because it creates a bit of a straw man, I feel, for the world that the narrator wants. Yes, Happily Ever After is miserable. Yes, it illustrates some of the shortcomings of a world without death, but I don't think it functions as a complete and total analogy for his world. Take the very concept of normal human lifespan. If you talk to a mayfly about it, they would see it similar to Happily Ever After, doing the same things over and over and over again, and it becoming tedium quickly. It's like if a mayfly told you that love and relationships will all become meaningless after a year because you're doing the exact same thing over and over and over again for hundreds of times the length of his lifespan. It just doesn't hold up because people like to do the same things over and over again as long as you can break it up with other things. I will never get tired of having a grilled cheese. Just find me like 3 other meals in between it and I'll enjoy it just as much as the last time. And I bet I could extend that loop to a few hundred years. And then you attach every possible meal ever conceived and to be conceived into that cycle. I will find something to do during immortality. And Happily Ever After kind of postures it as immortality is bad, and all it takes is a very specific example of how immortality is done within a single room, and doing like 2 different things perfectly explains how a world without death is really bad. Overall, this is an impossibly complex topic to break apart, and one that no human will ever be able to understand. I'm just tired of the mindset that I see over and over and over again, that no matter how you slice it, death needs to exist or everything else is meaningless, but like maybe it's a little bit more complicated than that, and flirting with concepts that are fully beyond what we can grasp due to the very nature of the unknown of anything past death makes this topic impossible to answer with certainty. But like, I don't know. Sorry, I said I wouldn't really get into it, but I did because it's a very interesting concept to me. Check out my last video if you want to see me talk about more of the nature of death. I'm very proud of it. If I want to get into some inexcusable flaws with a narrator that aren't related to subjective things, such as the very nature of death, there's plenty to get into. First and foremost is his arrogance, and ironically, his inability to empathize and see things from others' perspective. I say ironically because this is just about the same problem the princess has with humanities. They have more similarities than they'd like to admit. The narrator refuses to believe that there's any way he could be wrong 99% of the time, and even when presented with a version of himself that thought he was wrong,
Oh, Did I? That means nothing in the grand scheme of things. This construct you're in contains every possible world at once. The fact that you managed to find one reality among trillions where I was delusional proves nothing.
He is absolutely certain that his views relating to death is true, because he can't conceive of a world where nothingness is better than a version of something. I see why he can't, because similar to the long quiet and the shifting mound, he cannot know death. He can understand it, rationalize it, and look it in the eyes, but there is no understanding of not being, because all he is and will be is being until he is not. It does not matter if the necessity of it is explained to him, because you can't tell someone that being nothing is good, because it isn't anything at all. It can't be good, and it can't be bad. It's nothing. A bit of a simpler flaw of his to explore is just his straight-up arrogance. He created the long quiet, so he refuses to view it from a standpoint as anything other than a blade, a weapon to be used. His lack of empathy and understanding for the situation the long quiet is in makes him baffled when he begins to question the situation. He acts as if the long quiet understands and is as moved by the stakes as he is, when he literally just became aware and was thrust into a morally gray situation to murder a princess. I believe that the narrator imbued the long quiet with the voice of the hero due to his belief that he is a heroic being. I mean, what's more heroic than saving the world? A problem with that, though, is that heroism rubs against the premise of Slay the Princess. No hero wants to kill a helpless damsel in distress. So, the narrator is easily frustrated by any kind of resistance against his instructions, further expanding the rift between him and the long quiet. For such big stakes, he's actually pretty bad at convincing you to slay the princess. I mean, you're given no information about the situation, and when you question anything at all, the narrator is snappy and sarcastic, telling you that he can't tell you, and that you just have to take him on his word. As I said earlier, it makes sense why he can't tell him more, but he doesn't have to be such a dick about it all the time.
Eventually you pass into a blissful state of pure existence. Though words like eventually and pass ceased to have any meaning to you long before that shift, you simply exist. Happy. Forever.
The most interesting part of all of this is honestly how all of the characters and their goals and motivations play together. Take the den when you have both the stubborn and the hunted. The hunted is interested in survival, and the stubborn is interested in fighting. They bounce off of each other, the stubborn teaching the hunted that sometimes you have to fight to become more than prey. So, the hunted takes the initiative in the embrace your instincts path, taking the best route to survival while also holding on to the fighting push that the narrator has in him, consuming the princess with an amount of ferocity never seen before in the hunted, spurred on by the voice of the stubborn. The paranoid and the skeptic in the cage are another example, with the voice of the paranoid calling out the skeptic on his logical assessment of questioning that I mentioned earlier. In the world of the construct, perception is reality, and the paranoid is more keenly aware of the impermanence of the world he finds himself in, while the skeptic struggles to conceptualize something that distant from what he sees with his own eyes. They have to work together, though, to survive the tangle with the cage. The paranoid getting the idea in the long quiet's head that the chains can be cut through, and finally getting the skeptic on board with it. They're only able to cut the chains by all combining their wills together, escaping and being able to sink their blade into the heart of the princess. Off-script, Cater Blast here, talking about this. Something interesting about the voice of the paranoid and the skeptic is, I feel like we get a bit of an allegory of people who doubt situations from, I get almost religious connotations from the paranoid and the skeptic, and I don't see that it's intended, but I think the skeptic is almost like an atheistic perspective on the world. He views what he sees logically, and he wants to fully understand things from a perspective of testing, and if you can't prove something, you don't believe it. And there's nothing wrong with that perspective. I'm not dogging on any religions here. But the paranoid strikes me as more of a spiritual agnostic or something like that. Maybe like a psychonaut or something, someone who's done a good amount of acid brain damage and stuff like that. He's constantly questioning everything around him, and especially the very reality of the situation. And if you view that from a perspective, it's yeah, there are things you can't explain with this. And when the skeptic sees something he can't explain, he assumes that there's a logical explanation for it. He tries to find something, he assumes that someone is lying to him in one way or another. But when the paranoid sees something he can't explain, he questions the entire premise of all of the situation. I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but I really like the interaction between these two in the voice of the cage. Maybe I should do more off-script stuff. I feel like I'm flowing here. I don't know if I'm saying anything that makes sense. But yeah, that's just something I find really interesting. Back to the actually things I wrote down. The narrator is less often influenced by different forces just due to the nature of him existing as an echo, not having such a strong line of continuity within himself. But he can be acted upon and bring out more aspects of himself depending on what happens with the others. For example, take the wild route. When faced with the possibility of the princess and the long quiet escaping together, becoming one being, the path in the woods itself, they plan to find the edges of the construct and escape as one again, resulting in the awakening of the princess in the long quiet and the end and rebirth of everything. The narrator assumes a new voice, one angry, determined, and panicking, one willing to sacrifice his very world for the sake of others. His mindset is revealed somewhat through this.
Don't move an inch. Don't grow another blade of grass or harvest the remains of another dying creature so you can expand just that much further. Stop all of this. Right now.
Yes, he disagrees with the fundamental cycles of things, but being forced to see it firsthand, he goes from a sarcastic and snappy guide to a stalwart defender of what he views to be the right thing. It's the closest thing you see to him panicking, becoming a more active figure here than before. It's strange, another off-script moment. I feel like I'm doing this for this conclusion of the video. I'm in this mood. You see him become more determined than anything else, which kind of reinforces his selflessness in the grand scheme of things. He cares about the world that he's in, but there are situations where he knows that things are fucked. I think it's in The Adversary that I don't even know how this works, but in The Adversary route, when the stubborn and the adversary are fighting forever, he talks about he's gonna get a drink because he doesn't want to be sober for the end of the world. And judging by the wild, he could become a more active voice. He could try harder, and he does try harder in some other routes. And I suppose this is just due to the fact that it's different worlds and there's different narrators in each one. I do believe him when he says that there's a difference between the different ones. But yeah, since the wild is a situation where every world could be possibly doomed, you're looking at him showing even more determination than before because he cares about everything more than just his individual world. As he's saying, he's willing to give up things close to him, his own life, his own world, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff, in exchange for the greater good. He's a very greater good focused person, which is why I really don't like seeing him being described as oh, he's the selfish one. He's the most selfish. And no, he's not. He's flawed. He's a bit immature, I feel like, in his understanding of things. He automatically assumes, he's smart. He's very obviously intelligent. He split the world in two. But, it's not, he's tangling with things that he's not prepared to deal with, and that he cannot understand. He tries to he literally is trying to, put God in a box. It's a Hail Mary situation, and I understand it because it's the end of the world, but, his plan was almost always screwed. The situation he is in is impossible to deal with, but he tries his best, and I gotta give him that. He's definitely not evil. Stupid sometimes, yes, flawed and very close-minded, but he's definitely not evil. Another way that the narrator is seen as changing by the forces around him is in Happily Ever After. I've gone over this a little bit, but you see the most apprehension in his worldview here, seeing the princess's desire to leave and her misery, along with the reflection of what his world could end up being, has him change his mind on what he wants. He allows the world to go in peace this time, watching the princess escape. Okay, more off-script stuff about Happily Ever After, because this route is really interesting to me, and also kind of reductive. I think in Happily Ever After, we see a different version of the narrator here. Because there are times where the narrator sees things similar to a world of endless suffering, in the moment of clarity. That's what that is. But a combination of it being reflected as a somewhat reflection of what he wants, a positive world of endlessness. And also, I think this narrator just has less willpower than the other ones. A little bit. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I don't see the narrator from from the wild doing that at all. The narrator from the wild is ridiculously determined. But also, like, just seeing, he feels for the princess, and I think he tries to hide that, but, like, she is a princess. He's an anti-monarchist, though. Like, he talks about being against monarchy, but, like, when he sees the princess crying, that's, like, one of the things that, like, really seals the deal for him. I don't know. I don't think it's like, oh, princess pretty, so he feels more for her, but I think it's the helplessness. It's interesting. I'm gonna keep going. And now a fun example of seeing the voices bounce off each other is in The Princess and the Dragon. When left without a decider, the nature of how they would act if given the reins is shown. The cold and the hero play more passive voices, voting not to slay the princess, but the opportunist and the narrator vote to slay her, with the more active voice of the opportunist winning out. It shows his continued deference to authority, and the authority he sees is the narrator. The cold, strangely enough, decides not to want to slay the princess, but I think that's more just because he's already seen it twice. A third time wouldn't bring anything new to the table. It's similar with the hero, but not because of what he finds interesting, but what he finds right instead. He's seen you kill her twice, and nothing has come of it, and killing a princess again just seems like the wrong thing to do heroically. Cut that. I'm sick. I've COVID or something, I don't know. I really like The Princess and the Dragon, and all of the routes where you see the voices, like, really talking to each other on their own without much influence from the decider. I say the decider because a lot of people call him that, and calling him the Long Quiet is more like the aggregate of all of it together. The opportunist is really interesting in this route because, I mean, he's not acting outside of his character, but it really shows how far he's willing to go. Like, he flips on a dime here, and he's really easily convinced of things. I feel like he bounces off other people in the way that the moment he sees something that he views as the top dog, he immediately agrees to it, even when they don't have that much influence. Like, he sees the narrator, and I'm assuming he believes the narrator knows more, or is more important because the narrator knows more information about the situation than the rest of the voices. So he's like, this guy gets it. But in the grand scheme of things, the narrator is weaker than everyone else in the construct. He's just an echo. He's a voice. He tells you what happens, but he has very little influence on what can happen. Honestly, him being able to take over your body at the beginning is something interesting, and I want to be able to look into that more. And also, him being able to slam the door and throw the knife down the stairs. I suppose it's because he says these things, and then you believe them to be happening, so then they happen. But, like, there's a line somewhere in the game, I forget where it talks about how he's trying to, like, describe you down. He's speaking and, like, beating the shit out of you with his words, but it doesn't mean anything because the Long Quiet is the one who holds the reins here, which is such an interesting piece of, like, irony, because you hear so much about how the Long Quiet isn't change, but he is the agent of almost all of the change that happens in the game. The princess does things, yes, but she can't influence herself. You change her. I suppose that's because she is change, so she can, like, you change her, so she's the one that changes. Yes, so that's how she's changed, but she's not an agent to cause it. And that's another way. I don't know. This conclusion is supposed to be how they bounce off each other, but I'm just kind of rambling a bit here about things I find really interesting. I feel like there's some things to take out of this, though, from a character perspective. I'm talking about characters. It's a character-driven game. It's actually only characters in the whole game. Everything is the character. Maybe not the mirror or the pristine blade, but maybe yes. I don't know. Because the entire construct is the Long Quiet. Like, in Apotheosis, and heavily implied through the entire game. You see, like, the Long Quiet controls literally all of everything around him. Once the narrator is gone, the only thing keeping him there, once the narrator and princess are gone, when you slay the princess, the hero remarks, the only thing keeping you here is yourself. And then you, like, unfold your wings, and it's like, this is the whole construct. There's nothing else. So, I suppose a character-driven video is the only way to really go with this. Because there I'm not going to talk about the setting, because it is a character. That's just fun. I don't know. Back to the script. The different endings of the games are the best examples in my opinion, though. I've been over it before, but it's really the voices and the vessels you hear throughout the game that influence your decision. You as in the player. You come into the game with your own biases, of course, but through seeing various perspectives on the nature of the princess and allegories for death and rebirth, the princess can convince you whether or not you want to leave together with her as gods and continue the cycles of the ending of the universe, just for a new one to be born. This comes from the game acting on you, though. If presented with that decision at the very beginning, your own preconceived notions would have you making a different influenced choice. Even if you made the same decision, it may not be for the same reasons. This is why I think video games are a phenomenal medium for storytelling, because they manage to bring you in as a character yourself. In books, TV shows, and movies, you see different characters' viewpoints and goals all brushing up against each other. But you can't influence that. You are just you are a observer, an outside observer. But when playing a video game, you bring yourself into the shoes of one of those characters. In Slay the Princess, your own ideals lead to different goals you have for your character, which lead to the actions you take, and all of these can be influenced by what you see within the game. Whether the rhetoric of the narrator strikes a chord with you, or the cyclical nature of the shifting mound, or the spaces in between, the different ebb and flow of the voices in your head, who you are and what you want for the world of this game is molded by what occurs within it. And an interesting way that this works is that depending on what actions you take, new avenues open themselves up in the game. An entirely separate ending that I don't see spoken about often is when you manage to defeat the princess in her full godhood on your own, without the help of the hero. The only ways to do this is through consistently choosing to go out of your way to harm the princess whenever the opportunity presents itself. You mold the game around you, and you are molded by the game, and your mindset of fully committing to resisting the princess is reflected by the final choice you are able to make. You are as much of a titanic force as the princess is. Okay, wrapping up. This is just one analysis of Slay the Princess. This is a big game with a lot of avenues for exploration, but I think it's difficult to look at it from a perspective of this is a complete and total exploration of Slay the Princess. You can summarize the events, but what you take from it can be looked at in a million different ways. This is a piece of art, and yes, I'm confident in calling it art, that can be looked at through a million different lenses. It is a walking contradiction. A story about love, choices, death, rebirth, free will sometimes. I'm looking at you, the cage. And probably another 1,000 concepts I didn't even begin to grasp through my playthrough. I hope that you guys liked what I brought to this from a perspective of characters, what they want, what they represent, how they aim to get what they want, and how all those perspectives flip around and bounce back and forth over each other. I'm really just gushing here and talking about what I like at this point, but I feel like these flippier conclusions gives me more time to spread my wings and talk about how fucking good this game is. I personally really like the concept of the voices, taking a single word or emotion or feeling or something and turning it into a fully fleshed out, complicated character. And then those characters have so many different combinations and ways that they bounce off of each other. It reminds me a lot of Disco Elysium, and I wouldn't be surprised if Slay the Princess was slightly influenced. The different voices in your head and the thought cabinet that Raphael Ambrosius Cousteau has. I'm not gonna... I think even saying his name is a little bit of a spoiler. Go play Disco Elysium. It is... I'll probably make a video on it eventually, but like, dear lord, that game is a long, complicated, and political thing, and also all of the music in it is copyrighted, so that makes making a video on it kind of hard. This video essay here has been a bit of a selfish venture for me, if I'm being completely honest. I've been DMing my first D&D campaign for a few of my friends, and this game is a great way to look at character analysis and really understand what integral details exist to make a character believable and understandable in their actions. Because as I said earlier, actions made in a vacuum are just bad writing. Someone who does something just because doing the thing is what you wanted the character to do, or to further the plot in a specific way, just annoys the shit out of me. It has to align with their goals and general moniker they live by. Also, it was just really fun to do an analysis on quote-unquote simple characters, showing the amount of depth you can really put into something simple as, this one is stubborn, or this one is paranoid, or this one is skeptical. A lot of writing is just taking these simple concepts and worldviews and putting them into fun situations to see how they react. I mean, so much of writing, and some really interesting characters and different things. No examples are springing to the top of my mind right now. It's just like, what if this guy was doing this thing and you could make it... I mean, I think that's just what sitcoms are. Like, all sitcoms are just like, we take these characters, it's a situational comedy, and that's an entire massive genre. It usually isn't well written. But there are some good ones, like Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I feel like is a good example of what if we take these just like ridiculous, reductive, simple, terrible people and just put them in a thing and see how they act. Like that's if you write a good character, writing an actual story becomes so much easier because you can just be like, I put them here. What are they doing? What are they thinking about? What are their plans? How does this reflect on who they are as a person? I'm just rambling now at this point, so I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you all for the reaction to my last video. By the time I'm writing this, it's sitting around 800 views, which is way more than I expected from my very first video. I'm not looking to be able to make this a job or anything, but I love doing stuff like this and creating and talking about art and all of that stuff, and see people actually have a good reaction to it means so much to me. Until next time, everyone, and thank you so much for sticking around to the end of this video. I have a lot more in store, and I hope you guys stick around. You know, what all YouTubers say, make sure to like and subscribe, but honestly, you don't have to do anything like that. Thanks for getting through this one. I will see you all later, or maybe not. Bye-bye.
Yes, behold, the perfect woman.